Atlanta, 5:30 a.m. The sky in the east had only managed to stretch a faint pink streak along the horizon, while the earth remained immersed in a cool chill and a thin, silky mist. Yellow lights from the tall lamps stretched across the airport grounds at Hartsfield-Jackson International, casting shadows over rows of quiet taxis waiting. Here, every day, hundreds of thousands of people depart, part, and reunite. In the sea of people, Jeremiah Cole, a 13-year-old boy, stood out, yet seemed to blend into the flow. His gray suit, carefully chosen by his mother from a small shop near home, was impeccably tailored, the lapels perfectly fitted, the pants crisply pressed, and his leather shoes shining bright. His posture was as straight as a young pine tree against the wind. By his side he carried a black leather portfolio, a precious possession containing his year-long solar energy project. Jeremiah's small but firm steps led him towards the check-in counter. His face remained calm, but beneath that mask, his heart thudded loudly. It wasn't fear, but the awareness that today, somewhere, prejudice would once again test his resolve. "Keep your head high, son," his mother, Nadia Cole, had said before sending him off to the car. "You don't need to prove anything. You deserve your place." Her words were the invisible armor Jeremiah wore throughout his journey. At Gate 18, Flight 217 was preparing to depart for Los Angeles. The passengers jostled together, a mix of businessmen absorbed in their phones, families filled with lively chatter, and some young energetic travelers. However, as Jeremiah entered the priority boarding area, reserved for first-class passengers, he could clearly feel the scrutinizing eyes on him. A ground staff member politely checked his ticket. When he saw the name and seat number, 2A, he paused for a moment, his eyes quickly scanning Jeremiah. But in the end, he merely smiled mechanically, scanned the ticket, and courteously said, "Have a pleasant flight." Jeremiah thanked him, his voice calmer than he expected. The first-class cabin of the Boeing 777 was bathed in soft yellow lighting, evoking a sense of luxury and separation from the rest of the world. The leather seats were wide, the window curtains thick, and the feather pillows invited relaxation. But for Jeremiah, this was not paradise. The first step into the cabin made the atmosphere shift. A few eyes flicked toward him, glances mixed with curiosity, discomfort, and not least, disdain. Near the cockpit, Sandra Holt, the head flight attendant, was checking the drink cart. Her blonde hair was neatly tied up, her navy uniform impeccably pressed, and her high-heeled shoes clicked rhythmically on the floor. She looked up and caught sight of Jeremiah. In that brief moment, the professional smile on Sandra's face froze. She exchanged a quick glance with her colleague Tim Baxter, a man in his 40s, with a thin frame and a sunburned complexion. Their exchange was lightning fast. No words were needed. The discomfort was palpable. Jeremiah tried to hide any expression. He found a seat, 2A by the window, placed the portfolio carefully in the overhead compartment, and sat down. Before he could breathe a sigh of relief, Sandra marched over. "Excuse me, young man." Her voice syrupy sweet, but her eyes like daggers. "Are you sure you're sitting in the right seat?" Jeremiah looked up, slowly pulled the ticket from his vest pocket, and handed it to her. "Yes, ma'am. This is my ticket." Sandra took the ticket as though it were dirty, her eyes scanning the details. Name, seat number, first class. A flicker of irritation appeared when everything checked out. Refusing to relent, Sandra narrowed her eyes, pulled out her radio and whispered into her earpiece, checking the VIP list, and received the message. "Passenger 2A, Jeremiah Cole. Confirmed VIP. Connection to White House." Sandra's face immediately turned pale. She returned the ticket, her voice strained. "Oh, I'm sorry for the misunderstanding. Have a pleasant flight." But not everyone in the cabin overheard that message. In row 5C, a middle-aged woman in a red blazer muttered loudly, "These days, everyone thinks they're royalty just because they're wearing a cheap suit." A bald man beside her snorted with a sneer, nodding in agreement. Tim Baxter crossed his arms and leaned against the partition, observing like a hunting dog waiting for the signal. He glanced at Jeremiah once more, that look Jeremiah had grown all too familiar with since he was very young. And then, as though scripted, the accident happened. Tim walked past Jeremiah's seat, carrying a drink tray. As he passed, a cup of hot, steaming black coffee accidentally tipped over, spilling directly onto Jeremiah's lap. The hot liquid burned through the fabric of his suit, searing his skin. Tim pretended to panic. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, kid." Must have been the turbulence. Laughter erupted from a few passengers nearby, their smiles full of malicious delight. Jeremiah gripped the armrest tightly, his lips pressed together to keep from crying out in pain. In his eyes, those scalding drops weren't just burning his skin, they were burning his dignity. He pulled a tissue from his vest pocket and slowly wiped away the coffee, his gaze unwavering. "Don't let them see you hurt," his mother had said. "They can only hurt you if you let them." As Jeremiah busied himself wiping the portfolio, luckily it was only a bit wet, not damaged. An elderly figure appeared beside him, Dr. Lena Grayson, with her silver hair, small frame but sharp eyes like a razor blade. She gently placed her hand on Jeremiah's shoulder and whispered just loud enough for him to hear, "Don't let small minds decide the worth of a rising star." Jeremiah looked up. In that moment, in the warm yellow light of the cabin, the injustice seemed to melt before a greater power. Kindness. He nodded softly, the tears quietly retreating to where they had come from. This was only the beginning. The real storm was beginning to form behind the soundproof doors of the Boeing 777, and Jeremiah Cole, though still so young, would soon realize the fight for justice never has a retreat. The murmurs in the first-class cabin faded as Victor Kane stood up abruptly, his face flushed with anger, his index finger pointed threateningly at Jeremiah Cole. "This kid has a weapon!" Victor shouted, his deep voice echoing through the cabin. "It's in his backpack. I saw him hide a knife." The silence stretched for exactly 3 heartbeats before panic erupted. A middle-aged woman screamed, pulling her young son tightly into her arms. A portly businessman in seat 1C began rummaging through his suitcase as if building a fortress. Footsteps pounded, shouting echoed, and the sound of metal clashing rang throughout the cabin. Amidst the chaos, Jeremiah Cole remained frozen in his seat, his gray suit soaked with coffee, sticking to his sun-kissed skin. He understood. The nightmare had truly begun. The lessons from his mother flooded Jeremiah's mind. Stay calm. When the world turns its back, don't give them a reason to destroy you. Jeremiah's small hands slowly rose from his lap, palms facing up, allowing everyone to see. He had nothing in his hands. But that didn't change anything. The eyes now focused on him, tense, fearful, and gleaming with a quiet sense of satisfaction. No longer saw him as a child. He was no longer Jeremiah Cole, 13 years old, a technology prodigy. He was just a threat, a black figure in a drenched suit, a perfect target for the invisible fear ingrained in society's subconscious. Across the aisle, Dr. Lena Grayson gripped the armrest, her face pale. She had seen this too many times, from the civil rights struggles of the 1960s to the subtle prejudices of the 21st century. But she had never felt it so painfully before. A child, a brilliant mind, a future suffocated by an accusation with no evidence. Dr. Grayson stood up, the screech of the chair cutting through the noise. "Stop!" she yelled, her voice louder than the hum of the airplane engines. I'm sitting right here. I saw everything. There's no knife. You're setting this boy up. But no one listened. In the galley, Sandra Holt smiled coldly. She picked up the radio, speaking softly. It's time. Proceed to the next step. Beside her, Tim Baxter, the flight attendant with the old eagle tattoo, smirked. They had been waiting for this moment for a long time. The intercom crackled. Captain speaking. We will be making an emergency landing at Los Angeles International Airport. Please remain calm. But calm was a luxury in the first-class cabin at that moment. Victor moved forward, yanking Jeremiah's backpack from under his seat. Before Jeremiah could react, he rummaged through the bag, then, in a sleight of hand motion, slipped a cheap folding knife into the side pocket. "Here it is!" he shouted, holding the knife up for everyone to see. The trap had sprung perfectly, but there was one thing they hadn't counted on. In the row behind, a young girl in a gray hoodie, who had been silent throughout the flight, had managed to record everything with the phone hidden in her sleeve, every motion, every glance, every dirty trick. She sat quietly, her heart racing. She knew. In this moment the life of a child hung by a thread, only a send button away. In the cockpit, the captain shook his head in frustration when he heard the report from Sandra. 2A, the black kid. No verification needed. No listening to both sides. The order was sent down. Notify airport security. Prepare for restraint upon landing. As the plane touched down on the LAX runway, Jeremiah only had time to feel a sharp pull from both sides. 2 airport officers stormed in, saying nothing, twisting his arms behind him, cuffing his small wrists with tight handcuffs. Dr. Grayson surged from her seat, running forward, shouting, "This child is innocent. You're arresting the wrong person." But the officers in dark blue uniforms coldly dragged Jeremiah away as if he were a dangerous criminal. His backpack was discarded on the floor, his solar energy project scattered, coffee-soaked and ruined. And then, like an undercurrent, the reversal happened. The girl in the hoodie jumped from her seat. She raised her phone high, shouting, "I have proof!" They framed him. Here. I recorded it. All eyes turned toward her. Dr. Grayson seized the opportunity, snatching the phone and quickly playing the video in front of the security team. The footage rewound, Victor Kane secretly slipping the knife in, Sandra signaling to Tim secretly staging the scene. Everything was laid bare. Undeniable. The head of security turned pale. "Release the boy." Immediately. Jeremiah was uncuffed. He collapsed to the ground, his hands shaking from the tension and the rage held in check. Dr. Grayson knelt beside him, pulling his frail shoulders into a tight hug. "Do you see, Jeremiah?" she whispered. "There's still light. You just have to stand firm." Victor Kane backed slowly toward the rear of the cabin, his face red with fury. Tim Baxter turned as pale as a banana leaf. Sandra Holt gritted her teeth, her face contorted like a demon's. They knew. The first battle, they had lost. The plot on the runway, the plane's wheels rumbled heavily along the LAX runway, but for Jeremiah the ground no longer felt safe. Each step felt heavy, as if an invisible trap was lying in wait. He stood at the edge, quietly collecting the scattered pages, research papers about the solar power project for the underprivileged neighborhoods of Atlanta. Every sketch, every number was the blood and sweat of his efforts. Now, they were covered in the dirty shoe prints of those who had mocked him on the plane. Dr. Grayson kneeled beside him, gently reaching out to help, her eyes moist, but filled with determination. "You're not alone," she whispered. Jeremiah nodded, his trembling hand clutching the remaining papers. But deep down, he knew. The storm was far from over. The undercover ambush. The crowd of passengers continued murmuring. Some phones flashed, recording what had just occurred, while others watched Jeremiah with looks of sympathy. But from the end of the corridor, a group of men in black suits, wearing dark sunglasses and security badges that seemed foreign, moved steadily toward him. Dr. Grayson noticed them first. She stood up quickly, stepping in front of Jeremiah. "We need him," one of the large men, nearly 2 meters tall, said bluntly. "Come with us for questioning." "What papers?" "Where's the arrest warrant?" Dr. Grayson pressed, but they didn't answer. They just coldly flashed their badges. Fake ones so obvious that anyone who looked closely could see, if they bothered to pay attention. Jeremiah stepped back. He could hear his heart pounding in his chest, sweat breaking out even in the cold air. A trap. They had been preparing for this for a long time. The truth twisted. At that moment from behind, Sandra Holt emerged, holding a walkie-talkie. Her lips curled into a smug smile so small that only those paying attention would notice. "Uncontrolled threat," she said into the walkie-talkie, loud enough for the people around her to hear. Her words were like stones thrown into the already rippling water. Once again, without evidence, without reason, they painted Jeremiah with a label: troublemaker. A black child dressed neatly in a suit, a folder containing dreams. A proud smile once held, now turned into a threat. But Jeremiah was no longer the trembling child. He looked Sandra straight in the eye, then turned to face the fake security. In a calm voice, steadier than he had imagined, Jeremiah said, "I'm not going anywhere. No official orders. And I have a witness. The airport's security cameras. Hundreds of people are recording." Dr. Grayson took his hand, proud and encouraging. A few other passengers spoke up. "We'll testify. He didn't do anything wrong." The unexpected turn. Just as the situation seemed about to erupt, Dr. Grayson's phone rang. It was a call from Carl Ruiz, the attorney representing Jeremiah's family. His voice was frantic. "Hold your ground. I just sent the official documents to the FAA. The boy isn't to be touched until the federal inspectors arrive." And like a miracle, just 3 minutes later, 3 officers from the Transportation Security Administration, TSA, arrived. The fake security team was immediately asked to present their real IDs. The result? All fakes. Sandra tried to slip away toward the back door, but it was too late. A tall, young TSA officer stopped her. "Sorry, ma'am. Please come with us for questioning." The truth exposed. At the same time, the girl in the hoodie, the silent witness from the start of the flight, stepped forward. Her phone in hand, she played the video. From Sandra's deliberate attempt to fabricate the reason for kicking Jeremiah out of his seat, to Victor Kane secretly slipping the knife into Jeremiah's backpack. The whispers spread like wildfire. "What? They framed the kid!" "Disgusting." A wave of passengers immediately turned in anger, glaring at Sandra, Victor, and Tim. The reversal. In less than 15 minutes, Sandra Holt, Victor Kane, and Tim Baxter were handcuffed on the spot, escorted to the police cars. Jeremiah was officially declared innocent on the spot. LAX Airport issued a special announcement promising an internal investigation. Cameras from CNN, ABC News, and Fox News rushed in, starting to record. The image of a 13-year-old black boy, his suit disheveled, holding a damp folder tightly, standing tall amidst the storm, instantly became a symbol, the image of resilience. The moment of recognition. Dr. Grayson gripped Jeremiah's shoulder. She leaned close, whispering in his ear, "You've won." Not with fists, but with integrity. Jeremiah bit his lip, holding back the tears. Not because he was sad, not because he was scared, but because For the first time throughout the nightmare, he felt truly seen. The door had just opened. Carl Ruiz arrived with a new folder in hand. "Jeremiah, prepare yourself. The media wants to interview you. And there's one more thing. The White House just called." Jeremiah looked up, stunned. "They know your story, and they want to listen." In the distance, the sunset fell over the airport, casting a golden hue over the sky. The darkest day had ended with a light stronger than any darkness, but the greater storm was still ahead. Near midnight, at the Hilton Hotel in downtown Los Angeles, the tree lights outside the window shone brightly, but Jeremiah Cole still couldn't sleep. He sat at the computer, scrolling through his email inbox. Dozens of threatening messages. "Little con artist. Scamming brat. A parasite of society." The comments on Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok were even worse. His photos were being shared everywhere. Sitting in the chair, handcuffed. Edited and manipulated video footage, distorting the truth. "First-class fraud. Black teen terrorizes flight." The headline felt like a death sentence spreading across the web. Dr. Lena Grayson sat across from him, her laptop open to the raw video file. The clip sent to the conference organizers, clearly showing Victor Kane slipping the knife into Jeremiah's bag. The evidence was as clear as day. "We need to distribute this video," Dr. Grayson said, her voice steely. Nadia Cole, Jeremiah's mother, quickly dialed Carl Ruiz. "We need to strategize the media response right away." That night, they scheduled a meeting in the hotel conference room. The strategy for revenge, rekindling the light, Dr. Grayson spread out the documents on the table. The unedited raw video, witness testimonies, forwarded materials from the FAA and TSA. Carl Ruiz added, "I'll work with CNN, MSNBC, AP within 24 hours. They're the ones who can ignite our story." Nadia proposed a call to action video. Jeremiah telling his story, sharing the solar project. A dedicated website, justiceforjeremiah.com. Mobilize community leaders to ensure no obstacles are in the way of this large-scale campaign. The counterattack. The next morning, a short video appeared on Twitter and TikTok. Jeremiah, dressed in a tailored suit, spoke directly. "I'm Jeremiah Cole, 13 years old. I'm not a fraud. I'm someone who dares to dream." The video cut to scenes, the story of the solar project, Victor Kane slipping the knife, Jeremiah handcuffed, falsely accused. Never let fear divide our dreams. The hashtag number sign, Justice for Jeremiah, flooded the web. The backlash response. Within 24 hours, CNN, MSNBC, NBC all covered the story. Numerous politicians spoke out, calling for a thorough investigation by the FAA. The conference summit organizers announced Jeremiah as a direct honoree. The media reshaped the narrative, no longer the troublemaker boy, but the wrongfully accused boy who woke up the nation. Jeremiah sat before his laptop screen, seeing his face on the front page of the New York Times. Dr. Grayson whispered, "Truth always prevails if we dare to face it." Nadia Cole hugged Jeremiah. "My son, you're not just fighting for yourself. You're leading the way for millions." A new door opens. That afternoon, an email arrived from Washington. Direct announcement: Jeremiah Cole has been invited to speak at the National Youth Forum on Social Justice. Even Washington, right in front of the nation. Dr. Grayson looked at Jeremiah, her eyes shining with pride. "You've gone farther than your dreams, and this fight has only just begun." Jeremiah held his head high, his hand gripping his solar energy project folder tightly. "I won't let them silence my voice." The taxi sped through the streets of Washington, D.C., the city's yellow lights flickering on the fogged windows. Inside the car, Jeremiah Cole sat huddled in his charcoal suit, the wound on his left arm still aching beneath the white bandage. Beside him, Nadia Cole, his warrior mother, was continuously dialing her phone, while Dr. Lena Grayson sat in front, her tired yet determined gaze focused on the laptop screen. "I've sent the supplementary complaint to the FBI and the Department of Transportation," Nadia reported, her voice sharp. "They'll have to investigate the entire flight crew." Jeremiah tightened his grip on the portfolio, the notebook filled with the solar energy system designs he had poured his heart into. Though his body was covered in bruises, and the physical and emotional pain still lingered, his eyes burned with determination. He was no longer the child who was mocked on that plane. He had become a symbol, and he knew full well victory could not be temporary. When the car stopped in front of the hotel, a small group of reporters were already waiting. Flashbulbs erupted like a lightning storm. Jeremiah shielded his eyes and hurried into the lobby with Nadia and Dr. Grayson, passing through a barrage of questions, curious stares, and murmurs. Jeremiah overheard bits of conversation. "That's the kid who was ambushed on the plane. Zrania, the solar equity kid." In the elevator, Dr. Grayson whispered, "Tomorrow this won't just be a youth conference. The White House has scheduled a special address. Jeremiah, you need to be ready for the nation to hear your story." Jeremiah nodded, feeling both exhilarated and nervous. The next morning, Jeremiah donned a freshly tailored dark charcoal suit, a tight fit around his slender frame. Although his right hand was still wrapped in bandages, he stood tall, his eyes steady as he entered the National Conference Center. The main hall was packed. Over 500 attendees, from policymakers, business leaders, national journalists to youth from across the states, had gathered. At the far end of the hall, the presidential seal and the American coat of arms gleamed under the spotlight. Jeremiah held his head high. He knew. Today his voice could change everything. After the opening remarks, the MC introduced, "Please welcome to the stage Jeremiah Cole, honored for his courage and efforts for justice." The entire hall erupted into thunderous applause. Jeremiah stepped forward, the spotlight shining brightly on his gleaming black hair, his face marked with still healing wounds, yet radiating an extraordinary resilience. He took a deep breath, glancing down at Nadia and Dr. Grayson, who smiled and cheered him on, then began. "My name is Jeremiah Cole. I'm 13 years old. I'm here today, not because I'm unscathed, but because I didn't give up." A single clap echoed, then rippled into a wave of applause. "I was ridiculed on a flight just because of my skin color and because I wore a neat suit in first class. I was splashed with coffee, had a knife planted in my backpack, and was called a threat." Jeremiah paused, his eyes glowing with strength. "I was handcuffed in front of a crowd, slandered online, removed from a conference because of a fake video. I was attacked on the streets. My home, where I grew up, was burned to the ground." The room fell completely silent. Jeremiah continued, his voice deep and firm like the beat of a drum. "But through it all, I stood strong. I didn't retaliate with fists, but with the truth. Not with hate, but with numbers, designs, solutions to make where I live a stronger, brighter community." Images of glistening solar panels appeared on the screen behind him. The Solar Equity Initiative, a dream revived from the ashes. "I'm not here today to talk about what they did to me," Jeremiah said, lifting his chin. "I'm here to talk about what I chose to do with my pain." The hall erupted in applause. Behind the scenes, Victor Kane, though still in custody, still had remnants of his network. Some extremist blogs began spreading misinformation. But this time the public didn't believe the lies. Jeremiah had taken the stage, winning the hearts of the public with his resilience. At the side of the conference, clean energy companies approached Nadia, expressing interest in sponsoring Jeremiah. Activists called for Congress to pass anti-racism laws in aviation. Schools invited Jeremiah to share his inspiration. The boy who was once humiliated for daring to dream was now being embraced by the nation. At the end of the ceremony, a convoy of cars escorted Jeremiah and his family out of the center. On the way back to the hotel, Jeremiah opened his phone. Thousands of supportive messages flooded in, from young people of color, single mothers, engineers, and people who had never known him before but now saw him as a living inspiration. One special message from the White House made Jeremiah hold his breath. "Jeremiah Cole, the President would like to meet with you privately tomorrow afternoon in the Oval Office. Please confirm the appointment." He handed the phone to Nadia, his eyes wide with surprise. Nadia squeezed his hand. "You didn't just win for yourself. You won for an entire generation." As night fell over the Capitol, Jeremiah stood silently by the hotel window, gazing out at the bright golden lights beyond. Beneath the bandages, beneath the still healing scars, his heart burned with an unquenchable fire. He knew tomorrow wouldn't just be a historic meeting. Tomorrow, he would take a long step from being a victim of injustice to a symbol of change. And he wouldn't stop. The morning in Washington, D.C. was bathed in soft golden light, the first rays of sunshine piercing through the historic buildings, giving the U.S. Capitol an air of solemn grandeur. Jeremiah Cole, dressed in a light gray tailored suit, was preparing for the greatest moment of his life, his meeting with the President of the United States in the Oval Office. In the hotel room, Nadia Cole checked her son's appearance one last time. She adjusted his collar, her hands trembling slightly with emotion and anxiety. "Today you don't just represent yourself," she said, her eyes blazing like fire. "You represent all the children who have been looked down upon, who have been pushed aside. Walk in there as though you were born to be there." Dr. Lena Grayson stood by, holding the brown leather portfolio that had been with Jeremiah through countless storms. She nodded. "You've earned your place here with blood and resilience. Never forget that." A bulletproof SUV pulled up in front of the hotel. Two Secret Service agents stepped out, nodding to Nadia. "Cole family, we'll escort you to the White House." The car sped through the early morning traffic, weaving through streets adorned with fluttering American flags. Jeremiah gripped his portfolio tightly, his heart flooded with a mix of pride, nervousness, and a faint feeling of fear. But deep inside, the fire of determination burned brighter than ever. When they reached the West Wing gates of the White House, the security process was intense. Metal detectors, ID checks, and sniffer dogs. Every step was meticulous. Jeremiah passed through it all with a calmness he hadn't expected himself to have. A young receptionist dressed in a black suit greeted them with a warm smile. "Hello, Jeremiah. The President is waiting for you." They crossed the white marble corridor, passing portraits of past presidents lining the walls, and headed toward the Oval Office. The oak double doors opened, and Jeremiah stepped in. The Oval Office was vast, with the blue carpet featuring the presidential seal at its center, light flooding in through the large windows. The President, an older man with graying hair and sharp eyes, stood waiting by the resolute desk. "Jeremiah Cole," he said, his voice warm and weighted with significance. "Welcome to the White House." Jeremiah walked up, shaking the President's hand with all the confidence he could muster. His palm was slightly sweaty, but the handshake was firm. "Mr. President, thank you for welcoming me." The President smiled and gestured toward a sofa near the fireplace. They sat down, with Nadia and Dr. Grayson standing behind Jeremiah like guardian angels. "You've been through what few adults could summon the courage to face," the President said, his gaze thoughtful. "You're not just fighting for yourself. You've stirred an entire nation." Jeremiah tightened his grip on the portfolio. "I just wanted a chance to be heard, Mr. President," he replied. a chance that so many kids like me never get." The president nodded, his eyes sparkling with admiration. "And you've turned that chance into something undeniable." He pulled a small blue velvet box from the drawer and opened it to reveal a sparkling medal, the President's Youth Citizen Award. "On behalf of this nation," the president said, pinning the medal onto Jeremiah's suit, "we are grateful for you, Jeremiah Cole." The simple but highly dignified ceremony came to an end. As Jeremiah left the Oval Office, his heart swelled with a strange and sacred feeling. He was no longer the child who had been looked down upon. He had become a part of history. But as they left the White House, Nadia's phone rang incessantly. "Breaking news!" Carl Ruiz, their lawyer, gasped through the phone. "We've just received word. Victor Kane has escaped from federal custody." The air in the car froze. "What?" Nadia shouted. "How could that be?" "A group of insiders, extremists, orchestrated the escape," Carl hurriedly explained. "The FBI is searching for him. But listen, we've heard rumors. Victor is targeting Jeremiah. He swore he won't let this end like this." Jeremiah gripped the armrest, his heart pounding. All he had just won, all the hope that had blossomed, was now threatened by Victor Kane's wild rage. Nadia immediately turned to the Secret Service agents. "We need to change the route. Take us to a safe location right now." The SUV veered off, speeding away from Pennsylvania Avenue, merging into the chaotic traffic of the city. That evening, at a government safe house near Arlington, Jeremiah sat in a small room, the thick concrete walls casting a dim glow. Outside, federal special forces patrolled continuously. Dr. Grayson sat beside him, her hands never leaving the laptop, quickly scanning news feeds. All major news outlets have identified Victor as a dangerous fugitive, but he's still not caught. Nadia was on the phone constantly, setting up a series of new security measures. Jeremiah looked up at them, a burning question rising within him. "I've won. Why hasn't this nightmare ended?" Nadia squeezed his hand, her eyes like steel. "Because, Jeremiah, every time you stand up, those who fear change will fight you harder. But don't be afraid, because every time you stand strong, you light the world a little brighter." Dr. Grayson nodded. "We've pushed them back once. We'll do it again. And this time, we'll end it for good." Jeremiah closed his eyes, took a deep breath. He could feel the fear surrounding him, but more than that, he felt the fire inside, the fire of someone who knew. He wasn't fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for everyone who had ever been forced to be silent, and this time he wouldn't lose. The night fell over the safe house in Arlington, but inside Jeremiah Cole, a storm raged quietly. In the small room, illuminated only by cold fluorescent lights, Jeremiah sat on the metal bed, gripping the portfolio that had become like his breath. The pages inside, the models, plans, and dreams of a sustainable future, were intact, but the world around him was no longer the same. Dr. Lena Grayson sat at the small desk, her eyes scanning a security map that had just been sent. The checkpoints, barricades, and patrol teams were heavily marked. Nadia Cole, his mother, was urgently speaking with the lead agent, her gaze as cold as steel. "Do we have confirmation of Victor's location?" Nadia asked, her voice sharp. "Not yet." The agent shook his head, his face tense. "But the latest intel suggests he's left his initial location. He may be trying to get to Jeremiah." Jeremiah swallowed hard. A part of him wanted to shrink away from the approaching danger, but a much larger part burned with intensity. He had stood strong on the national stage. He had won against vile schemes. He would not falter now. "I don't want my son just running away forever," Nadia said, each word like a force against the wall. "If Victor comes, we'll be ready." Nearly midnight, and as the facility sank into suffocating silence, the threat began to take shape. A faint screech came from the ventilation system. Dr. Grayson lifted her head, furrowing her brow. Jeremiah, who had been sketching a new layout for the community solar system, stopped. He felt the shift, the air thickening, as if the darkness itself was lurking. A special agent approached, handing Nadia a radio. "Unusual movement in the east. The teams are closing in." Nadia nodded, her eyes never leaving Jeremiah. She squeezed his shoulder. "No matter what happens, you stay in my sight. Understand?" "Yes." Suddenly the alarm sounded, tearing through the night with a piercing shriek. The light switched to red emergency mode. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the halls as armed units rushed toward the threat. Then, all at once, everything went silent. "What happened?" Dr. Grayson asked, her voice harsh. The radio crackled before a trembling voice responded, "Lost contact with Bravo team. Someone's tampering with the main power system." Before anyone could react, all the lights in the facility went out. The darkness swallowed them whole. Jeremiah felt his mother's grip tighten on his shoulder. Dr. Grayson quickly turned on her flashlight, the light flickering nervously around the room. "Stay calm," Nadia ordered. "We need to move to the security room." They rushed down the hallway, the darkness surrounding them like a living creature. The sound of breaking glass, distant gunshots, and chaos filled the air. Then, from around the corner, a tall figure appeared. Victor Kane. He wore black armor, his gun gleaming in the dim light. A long scar on his neck burned red beneath the flickering flashlight. "Hello, kid," Victor snarled, his voice dripping with mockery. "Remember me?" Jeremiah froze, his heart racing, but he didn't retreat. Nadia stepped in front of Jeremiah, her eyes burning with fury. Dr. Grayson silently moved to the side, her hand slipping into her coat pocket. "No one dies tonight," Nadia said, her voice steady. "Step back, Victor. The federal agents are coming." Victor sneered, "Don't care. I'm here for him." He aimed the gun at Jeremiah. "You made me lose everything. Now I'll take it back." A soft hiss echoed. In the moment when all attention was on Nadia, Dr. Grayson activated the temporary jamming device. The flashlight flickered wildly, and the loudspeakers emitted a deafening sound. Jeremiah seized the opportunity, charging toward Victor. He was smaller, weaker, but his speed and determination surged like a coiled storm. Caught off guard, Victor staggered. Jeremiah lunged at the gun in his hand, wrenching it away. The gunshot rang out, the bullet ricocheting off the ceiling. A brutal struggle ensued in the red-tinted darkness. Nadia charged forward, landing a punch to Victor's ribs, causing him to bend over. Dr. Grayson, without hesitation, swung the steel flashlight, striking him hard in the temple. Victor growled, trying to swing his arm in retaliation, but Jeremiah, despite being exhausted, his hands still aching from earlier, used all his strength in a powerful kick to Victor's knee. Victor crumpled to the ground. In that moment, federal agents stormed in. Flashes from their flashlights lit up the room, and orders echoed, "Get down! Drop the weapon!" Victor Kane was subdued, his face swollen, still spitting venomous curses. When everything settled, Jeremiah realized he was panting, drenched in sweat. Nadia hugged her son tightly, her shoulder trembling slightly. Dr. Grayson stood nearby, her glasses cracked on one side, but her eyes still burning with triumph. A federal agent approached, nodding solemnly. "Kid, you just saved all of us." Jeremiah smiled faintly, a tired but resolute smile. He hadn't given up. Not against Sandra, not against Tim, not against Victor. And he never would. The sun poured over the safe house in Arlington, its golden light casting warmth on the cold walls. After the terrifying night, none of them, Jeremiah, Nadia, or Dr. Grayson, could view this place as a refuge anymore. But within their hearts, a different feeling had ignited: determination. In the emergency meeting room, Carl Ruiz, the seasoned lawyer Nadia trusted, was presenting a new plan. He pushed his black-rimmed glasses up the bridge of his nose and laid a thick stack of files on the table. "With the evidence from last night's attack," Carl began, his voice sharp, "we can elevate the lawsuit from a civil charge to a criminal one. Victor Kane didn't just commit personal crimes. He's the tip of an organized conspiracy." Nadia crossed her arms, her gaze piercing. "Sandra and Tim." Carl nodded. "Exactly. And thanks to the whistleblower's audio recording, we know they didn't just act out of racial hatred. They did it for profit. A scheme to take Jeremiah down for personal gain." Jeremiah clenched the portfolio in his hand, his heart cold yet burning with rage. How many dreams, how many efforts had nearly been crushed under the weight of greed and hatred? Dr. Grayson spoke in a deep, resolute voice. "We won't let them escape." At the same time, the American media exploded. On screens across the nation, images of Jeremiah in his gray suit, head held high as he received the medal from the president, were shown alongside pictures of Victor Kane being escorted into prison, dressed in an inmate's orange jumpsuit. Headlines flooded the news. "Brave Black Boy Dismantles Network of Hatred." The biggest airline scandal of the decade: Sandra Holt and Tim Baxter disappear. From victim to national icon Jeremiah Cole. Schools, community centers, and activists rallied, hosting Stand Tall with Jeremiah seminars. Human rights groups demanded harsh prosecution of those responsible for this tragedy. On the other side, extremist factions secretly plotted their next move. That afternoon in the emergency meeting room, Carl laid out the details of the next legal campaign. "We'll sue the airline for systemic racism, conspiracy with criminals, severe financial and emotional damages to Jeremiah." He slammed the file down on the table. "Additionally, we'll coordinate with federal authorities to capture Sandra Holt and Tim Baxter by any means necessary." Jeremiah clenched his fist. He knew this wasn't just a fight for himself anymore. This was a fight for every child who had been looked down upon, pushed aside simply because of their skin color and background. Dr. Grayson, her voice steady but firm, "When justice prevails, you won't just build solar grids for the community. You'll light up an entire generation." Jeremiah nodded, his eyes burning brightly. That evening, in the government safe house, as the city sank into sleep, Jeremiah opened his laptop. He knew, even though social media was flooded with support, there were still dark corners where fake news and hatred brewed. But this time, he wasn't just defending. Jeremiah opened a new presentation file. Title: Project Phoenix Rebuilding Trust. An initiative not only about solar energy, but about creating safe spaces for young people of color, teaching them technology, law, and leadership. No one could take his dream away now. The next morning, as Jeremiah, Nadia, and Dr. Grayson were preparing to leave for court to officially file the expanded lawsuit, Nadia's phone rang. The screen showed FBI Director Grant. Nadia glanced at Jeremiah before answering. "We've located Sandra and Tim." The room held its breath. "They're trying to flee the country, but we'll act within 48 hours. Nadia pressed her lips together, her voice sharp as a blade. "Don't let them escape." As the armored SUV sped through the bustling streets, Jeremiah pressed his forehead against the window, gazing out at the vast expanse of Washington, D.C., bathed in golden sunlight. A new life awaited him. But before reaching that dream, he knew one final battle had to be fought: to expose Sandra and Tim's mask to the light, and to erase the stain they had tried to imprint on his life. The armored SUV glided smoothly through the streets of Washington, D.C., as Jeremiah Cole, Nadia Cole, and Dr. Lena Grayson made their way to the federal courthouse. In Jeremiah's hands was the expanded lawsuit, each line of text carving out the crimes of Sandra Holt, Tim Baxter, and Victor Kane. The sky that day was tinged with a steel-gray hue, heavy and foreboding. A bad omen, but none of them hesitated. Carl Ruiz, the seasoned lawyer Nadia trusted, was waiting at the courthouse entrance, wearing a dark suit, carrying a thick briefcase filled with documents. His eyes were colder than those of the lawyers who had taken down the largest corporations in America. "Hot news," Carl said as the group stepped out of the car, lowering his voice as if the wind itself might hear. Sandra and Tim planned to catch a private charter flight tonight, heading to a non-extradition area. "Location?" Nadia demanded sharply. "Maryland," Carl replied. "A remote airport." Jeremiah tightened his grip on the case, the straps pressing into his palm. "We need to stop them," Dr. Grayson said firmly. Carl nodded. "The FBI has a plan, but they need a legitimate reason to act before they board the plane." Nadia flashed a cold smile. "We'll give them that." She waved her hand. "Let's go." Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was thick like glue. The evidence was presented clearly. The recording of the plan to receive payment from Victor, testimonies from witnesses on the flight, CCTV footage from the hotel corridor where Victor, Sandra, and Tim secretly met to plan. The judges whispered to each other, reporters held their breath, and cameras flashed incessantly. Jeremiah, in his navy blue suit, stood up. His voice rang out clearly through the courtroom. "I'm not just fighting for myself. I'm fighting for every child who has been wrongly named, every child who has been pushed out of a dream just because of the color of their skin. Today, I demand justice." A murmur of applause rippled through the room, quickly hushed by the presiding judge's signal for silence. When the hearing concluded, Carl received a message. "Target moving. Action in 30 minutes. "Let's go," Carl hissed, and the group rushed out to the car. The SUV sped toward Maryland. Through the internal radio system, Carl updated. "Sandra and Tim have arrived at the Edgewater Private Airport. They've passed through LAX security." "Their flight?" Jeremiah asked, his eyes glued to the GPS screen. "A Gulfstream G550, scheduled to take off in 20 minutes, Carl replied. "If they take off, it'll be nearly impossible to extradite them." Nadia grabbed Jeremiah's hand, her gaze unwavering. "We won't let that happen." At Edgewater, Sandra Holt, her face twisted with hatred, was pushing her suitcase up the airplane stairs. Beside her, Tim Baxter's face was pale, his eyes darting nervously. "Hurry up!" Sandra hissed through clenched teeth. "Once we take off, it's all over." Tim nodded frantically, but his trembling didn't escape Sandra's notice. Part of her knew. Failure this time would be the end. But just as they stepped onto the plane, headlights flashed brightly. "FBI, stop! Drop your luggage and put your hands on your head!" The loudspeaker blared, cutting through the quiet night. Both Sandra and Tim froze, like wild animals cornered. Sandra muttered, her eyes wide with disbelief. "No, this can't be." From a distance, Jeremiah, Nadia, and Dr. Grayson watched. Jeremiah felt a shiver run down his spine as he saw the two who had nearly crushed his dream now writhing in despair. "This is just the beginning," Nadia whispered. Sandra Holt tried to run toward the cockpit, but two agents rushed in, quickly restraining her. The sound of handcuffs snapping shut rang like a victory anthem for Jeremiah. Tim Baxter didn't resist. He dropped to his knees, hands behind his head, mumbling, I was forced." No one paid him any mind. On the way back to D.C., in the armored car, Sandra looked through the bars at the distance, where Jeremiah stood firm beside his mother and Dr. Grayson. Her gaze was filled with hatred, but also tinged with defeat. Jeremiah, sensing her gaze, didn't look away. He stared straight into Sandra's eyes, his look not one of hatred, but of affirmation. He had won. That evening, in the warm hotel room, Jeremiah spread the new files on the table. Project Phoenix was ready to take off. Outside the window, Washington, D.C. gleamed like a beacon in the night. Nadia poured a glass of water and handed it to her son. "Tomorrow," she said, her voice steady but full of pride. "You'll start not just a new chapter for yourself, but for thousands of other children." Dr. Grayson nodded, her glasses catching the light. "We've fought," she said, "and we've won." Jeremiah picked up the pen and signed the document establishing the Project Phoenix Fund. One signature, but it felt like an oath. No one would ever steal his dreams again just because he was different. The first light of day filtered through the hotel window, bathing the room in a soft golden glow. Jeremiah Cole stood motionless, his hand clutching a steaming cup of coffee. Today he would officially launch the Phoenix Fund, a project to rebuild dreams, not just for himself, but for the thousands of children who had been oppressed by prejudice and injustice. Nadia Cole, in a perfectly tailored navy blue suit, approached with a freshly printed stack of documents in her hands. Dr. Lena Grayson, wearing a light-colored blazer, her glasses catching the sunlight, stood by the window. Her gaze distant, yet her smile filled with quiet satisfaction. "Are you ready?" Nadia asked, her voice calm but laced with pride. Jeremiah nodded, his eyes shining with an unwavering belief. The Phoenix Fund launch was held at the National Conference Center, where hundreds of delegates, sponsors, activists, and those who had witnessed Jeremiah's journey gathered. The stage was brightly lit with a giant poster behind it, "Phoenix, rebuilding from the ashes for a just future." When Jeremiah stepped onto the stage, the entire hall fell silent. Dressed in a sleek black suit with the White House medal glinting on his chest, he no longer looked like the 13-year-old boy who'd been belittled on that flight. He was now a living symbol of resilience. He took the microphone, his voice steady and powerful. "I am Jeremiah Cole, son of a mother who never bowed down, a student of a teacher who never let go, a survivor of hatred, violence, and defamation." The hall held its breath. Phoenix is not just a name, it is a vow that from the ashes of injustice we can build dreams bigger than before. Phoenix will fund clean energy projects in forgotten neighborhoods. It will offer scholarships to children who were told they were not worthy. It will build creative centers for young talents who were once overshadowed. The applause erupted, loud and raucous, like the sound of crashing waves. After the speech, major sponsors such as the Gates Foundation, Google.org, and Solar City pledged millions of dollars to the Phoenix Fund. Major news outlets, including CNN, NBC, and the Washington Post, ran stories about Jeremiah as a beacon in the darkest night of America. Social media exploded with the hashtags #Jeremiah lives and #Rise with Phoenix. Jeremiah stepped down from the stage, surrounded by handshakes, admiring glances and congratulations. But he didn't forget. He didn't forget the 2A seat, the coffee splashed on his new suit, the knife that tore through his dream on the conference stage, or the home that was reduced to ash. All of it had been forged into a fire within his heart. That evening, in the warm hotel room, Jeremiah sat with Nadia and Dr. Grayson under the soft glow of candles. "Are you proud of yourself?" Nadia asked, her smile weary but radiant. Jeremiah smiled faintly, his eyes heavy with emotion but not sorrow. "I'm not proud just for myself, Mom. I'm proud for all those who have been extinguished, who now have a chance to blaze again." Dr. Grayson clinked her glass of orange juice with Jeremiah's. "You didn't just survive, Jeremiah. You've soared." The next day, a handwritten letter arrived at the hotel. The sender, the President of the United States. Dear Jeremiah, you've reminded us that the American dream is not reserved for one race, one class, or one background. You have turned adversity into motivation, pain into triumph. You don't just represent the future, you are building it. Wishing you continued success. This nation is proud of you, the President of the United States. Nadia read the letter, her eyes filling with tears. Dr. Grayson took a photo of the letter, preserving it as a historical milestone. Jeremiah quietly folded the letter and placed it in the Project Phoenix folder. A new spark ignited within him. 6 months later. In a suburban neighborhood of Atlanta, once drowned in darkness every summer due to high electricity bills, the first row of houses had solar panels shining brightly under the morning sun. Below, children ran and laughed, no longer afraid of power outages or hunger. A small sign hung by the gate. Phoenix Neighborhood, reborn, thanks to Jeremiah Cole. Jeremiah stood still, his hand resting on the sign. Beside him, Nadia and Dr. Grayson were silent, their hearts full of pride. In the distance, a little black girl ran up, handing Jeremiah a crumpled drawing of a sun and colorful houses. "Thank you for bringing light here," she chirped. Jeremiah knelt down, accepting the drawing, his eyes welling up. He ruffled the girl's hair, then looked up, his gaze resolute. "We'll build more. For all the kids. For everyone who's been left behind." The wind picked up, blowing his hair, and in the warm light, Jeremiah Cole, the boy who had once been kicked out of first class because of his skin color, had truly risen like a phoenix. The message and life lessons from Jeremiah Cole's journey. No one has the right to define your limits except for you. Jeremiah Cole, a 13-year-old boy, was ridiculed, sabotaged, and even nearly robbed of his dreams at the threshold of success, simply because of the color of his skin. But instead of surrendering, he turned each blow into motivation. The great lesson here: no one but yourself gets to decide what you are worthy of. Even when mocked, slandered, or pushed down, your resilience and unwavering belief in your self-worth will be the foundation for your brilliant rebirth. Injustice doesn't die by your silence. It only weakens when you speak up. Had Jeremiah stayed silent when Sandra, Tim, and Victor attacked him, the truth might have been buried forever. But he stood up, gathered evidence, and made his voice reach all the way to the White House. The real lesson: silence sometimes aids injustice. Speaking up, even if weak, is always better than bowing your head in acceptance. Only when enough people dare to speak, dare to prove, will the bullies and corrupt systems be forced to change. Family, teachers, and those who believe in you are the fortress against an unjust world. Jeremiah didn't fight alone. By his side was his mother Nadia, the living embodiment of love and strength, and Dr. Grayson, the teacher who quietly fueled him and instilled unshakable faith. The great lesson: in the darkest moments, what matters most is not wealth or fame, but hands that never let you go. No matter how strong you are, a lone warrior will exhaust themselves. But with a family and community beside you, you can rise from any battle. No one is too small to create big change. Jeremiah was only 13. He had no power, no status, no wealth. But with perseverance, talent, and an unshakable belief, he made an entire system take notice, forced an airline to reform, and inspired millions. The real lesson: you don't need to be famous, wealthy, or powerful to make a difference. You just need enough perseverance and courage to begin. No one is too small if their heart is big enough. Revenge through success is the loudest answer. Victor, Sandra, Tim, they all tried to drag Jeremiah into despair using every tactic: violence, slander, destruction of his reputation, and even his personal life. But in the end, Jeremiah didn't respond with hatred. He responded by rising higher, building the Phoenix Fund, turning his pain into light for thousands of other children. The profound lesson. Retaliating with hatred only prolongs the darkness. Retaliating with success causes the darkness to fade on its own. Jeremiah's proud presence was the most powerful slap in the face to those who tried to destroy him. No victory comes easily, but every scar is worth it. Jeremiah's victory was not clean or perfect. He carried scars, physical wounds from the attacks, emotional wounds from his losses, and the pain of seeing his home reduced to ashes. But those scars made his victory worth more than 1,000. The real lesson: don't fear the wounds on your journey. They don't make you weaker, they make you undefeatable. Every pain is a part of the map leading to true victory. When the old fire dies, use the ashes to build a new flame. The home was burned. The conference was shattered. His reputation almost destroyed. Jeremiah could have fallen, but he chose to rebuild from scratch. By creating the Phoenix Fund, bringing clean energy to poor neighborhoods, and inspiring an entire generation. The final, most profound lesson. When life burns your old dreams down, use the ashes to ignite new ones. No one, nothing, can extinguish a resilient soul. In the end, Jeremiah Cole's journey is not just a personal victory story. It is a powerful declaration that light may be obscured, but it can never be extinguished. The truth may be buried, but it will eventually shine bright. Those who persist even with bloody feet will eventually find their wings, and each of us on our journey in life can be a Jeremiah Cole if we refuse to surrender to the darkness.